Alhamdulillah. This session is called Endowment 101. And today, inshallah, we're going to learn what endowments are, how they are important for a school's long-term health, and we'll really understand, inshallah, the history of endowment in our community as Muslims. And I love the story behind endowments. When I understood it, it really helped us. Today's presentation is brought to you by one of our great organizations, Islamic Schools League of America. I am proud to serve as one of the board members for Islamic Schools League of America. And it's important for us to understand that the ISLA was formed over 20 years ago as an answer to a prayer for our schools who were opening and closing, opening and closing. And we had a great leader who saw an opportunity for us to galvanize the work we do, to unite and come together. And alhamdulillah, 20 plus years later, now this organization, the ISLA, serves over 400 full-time schools in the United States. And that 400 full-time schools represents 100,000 Muslim students and 9,000 education professionals. We are an organization that works really hard on providing for our schools, research, resources, and opportunities for us to network and connect with one another and to learn. So we learn from professional development in sessions just like this. And we have coming up a number of experiences for you. So if you have your phone, you can go ahead and scan this now to look at our next fundraiser our next event. It's called Ramadan Fundraising for Islamic Schools. And this will help schools to understand best practices for coordinating a Ramadan fundraiser. It will also help us to understand how we can access the tools and templates that are available based on research to help us with promoting our schools and accessing the best and the most funds that are available through these experiences. And also from this, we will learn practical research-based approaches to doing fundraising, to get advice for Islamic schools from professionals in the field. And that's going to be Tuesday, February 3rd. So that's right around the corner, coming up 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We highly recommend this event for anybody in school, your board members, your fundraising coordinators, and we have rates for members and non-members for that event. We also have coming up on February 10th, the following week, Retirement 101 for Islamic school educators, something that we may not necessarily engage in enough, making sure that our schools and our school leaders have what they need when they move beyond our school. So we'll understand how retirement works, how we can use retirement packages to help our schools and to grow our schools and maintain our educators in those schools. And then we also have our monthly admin meeting, which is on Wednesday, February 11th at noon, which is Eastern Standard Time. And that's an opportunity for us to network and talk. This month, we're going to look at ICE and Islamic schools and what admins need to know. And our guest speaker that day will be Angelica Ochoa, who is a partner with Fisher Phillips. We have coming up classroom management in Islamic schools from Fitra to Function, and that's going to be in April, and that's going to be several days that we'll be doing this from April 22nd to May 20th, 6 p.m., and you will receive session recordings, networking, practical strategies, as well as a certificate of participation. So these are just some of the things that ISLA has coming up. You can see we are truly engaged and truly interested in making sure our schools function to their best. And now, drum roll, we are very excited about our Endowments 101 presentation tonight. Dear brothers and sisters, we have with us Brother Muhi Khwaja, and he is the co-founder of the American Muslim Community Foundation, AMCF. He is a certified fundraising executive with over a decade of experience in nonprofit development and philanthropy. He has worked with numerous national and community-based organizations and has helped families distribute over $6 million in charitable giving. Brother Muhi is also an adjunct faculty at Indiana University's Lilly School of Philanthropy, and he hosts the Muslim Philanthropy Podcast. Dear beloved brothers and sisters, it is my honor and my pleasure to present to you Brother Muhi Khwaja.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to share more about American Muslim Community Foundation and how we help families, but primarily nonprofit organizations set up endowments and traditionally what are known in Arabic as waqf or awqaf. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. I want to start off with a hadith and reminder that in our tradition, we are taught that when a person dies, their deeds ends except for three: a continuing charity, beneficial knowledge, or a righteous child who prays for them. And with the work that each of you do in schools, I truly believe that schools have a legacy of completing all three of these things. And the way to do it through an endowment or a continuous charity, we can talk through what that represents. But we're reminded so many times through hadith, through the Quran about charity, and we're heading into Ramadan, and you're going to have other webinars talking about the importance of fundraising and building those relationships with your donors to understand the blessed work that you do in each of your institutions. And what I'm hoping that I can share with you in more detail is focusing on that future sustainability, the long term, to be here not only for today, but for future generations. I'm sure many of your schools, and feel free to put in the chat, have already been around for a few decades. And if not, I'm sure you know of schools that have been around for a few decades, but that's hard work. Year over year, we know that tuition only covers so much. So the idea of endowments really, we're going to talk today about what are endowments, how they're beneficial for your schools, what some short-term and long-term strategies are, how to set one up, what the costs are, or fees and paperwork needed. But I'm sure many of you are familiar with a few schools that actually already have endowments, maybe within the Muslim community, definitely outside of the Muslim community. I went to the University of Michigan, where in 2025, they had about a $21 billion endowment. That's with a B. Harvard's is at $56 billion. Now, traditionally, in many of these schools and universities, tuition may only cover 70% of your operating budget, but the remainder is often covered by scholarships, fundraising, and endowments. So that's why preparing from now, you can make a difference over the next 5 to 10 years with your institution through the power of investments. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with just regular investment accounts, whether it's for a retirement account for yourself or through a brokerage firm that you have an investment account. But an endowment really acts as an investment account for your nonprofit institution. So an endowment is a fund that's set aside by the nonprofit organization so that it can continue to grow. And each year, the nonprofit can enjoy the return on investment while leaving the principal intact. And when I say principal, not the person who runs the school, but the principal of the endowment, the amount of money that you set into the investment vehicle, that's also known as the principal. So AMCF provides the resources of an investment manager. It provides the support in setting up the infrastructure and hosting and collecting the funds for your nonprofit organization. And you would then provide a balance to start the endowment. And essentially, we don't have any minimums. Some start with a few $1,000s, others start with more, depending on where they're at. Others have set a 10% rule where 10% of their operating budget automatically goes into an endowment. Others are more conservative and want to make sure, which is smart, that you have 4 to 6 months of operating budget in cash before you start savings, just as you would for family planning and emergencies. You want to do the same thing for your institutions. So we'll get a little bit more into the ins and outs of how endowments work, but I want to walk through the religious and historical perspective of Islam and endowments, or as they're called, al-Qaf. So the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, encouraged his companions to establish these waqf or al-Qaf with their wealth, and many of them did. Some examples include the Prophet's waqf of 7 gardens, Abu Talha Ansari's fresh water well, and other wells as well, other properties that were to benefit the community. And one of those, for example, Zubair ibn al-Awam radiallahu anhu's residence was placed in a waqf for the immediate benefit of not only his children, but the perpetual benefit of the poor and the needy. Other examples continued on, and many of you have probably heard or are familiar with Al Qarawwayn University in Fez, Morocco. It was founded on the Waqf, donated by Fatima Al Fihri, and is the oldest institution of higher education. And its physical layout was later a model for universities such as Oxford and Cambridge. So, in terms of how it was set up, how it was designed, how the students were held in quarters, and to this day, it still is providing income from that original investment of the property and the building and the funds put in to provide tuition and schooling for the students and the scholars that are associated with the university. Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, also established by Caliph Harun Rashid in Baghdad, housed hundreds of thousands of books as well. And hospitals such as Caliph al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik's in Damascus and Adud al-Dawla's in Baghdad, al-Razi, meat experiment were other examples of hospitals that were set up by endowments and excelled in care and cleanliness. Many of you are also familiar with the Masjid al-Aqsa complex, and it's managed by the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf. Kulli, or form of Waqf developed by the Turks, also include a central mosque and learning service and income generating buildings from schools and bakeries and guest houses. And examples of that are the Fatih Mehmet Kulli in Sarajevo and the Selim Kulli in Edirne, Turkey. And then, of course, the Haramain Waqf, which supports needs for secure passage to Mecca as well. So as you see, there's a long-standing history of examples of the importance of endowments in our community. And AMCF works to revive this tradition of Waqf, and we want to reestablish the prominence and role of endowments for the American Muslim community. So in Arabic, in Islam, the religious meaning of waqf or awqaf may be more associated with a mosque or something that is donated to Allah, but it loosely translates to endowment in English. And although they're not exactly the same, they can be synonymous in these cases, primarily for the benefit of an institution, and making sure that our nonprofit organizations learn about endowments, the benefits of endowments, and are inspired by our Islamic faith traditions to establish an endowment will be better for the community overall. And we do this by creating an endowment mindset, that we think from a place of abundance, that we think from a place of the Muslim community having enough capacity to support the causes that are important to us, not only from an operational year over year budget, but from an institutional, generational standpoint of being able to establish endowments that produce enough income to support our operations as well. So many times, organizations will set aside a sister organization whose primary purpose is to be the endowment of the institution. But as many of you know, it's tough to operate a nonprofit organization. So that's where AMCF comes into play, where we can manage the investment vehicle for you and allow you to still reap the rewards and benefits of having an endowment like structure. And it's not necessarily meant to take away from your current operational funding needs. If you're able to clearly articulate the reason for an endowment to your donors, they should continue to support your operating budget and be able to provide an additional gift to support the endowment as well. And in terms of looking at it again, we started off with the hadith around the Sadaqah Jariyah, leaving a legacy. Framing it in that way may make the most sense to your donors as well, that this is something beyond our lifetimes that will continue to benefit us long after we are gone and hopefully build for the institutions that we have. Now, I want to share a few organizations that may be similar to yours. Some of them are schools, but many of them are social service organizations or in different capacities. But American Muslim Community Foundation works with these institutions to set up their endowments, and we have in the past worked with these institutions to invest on their behalf as well. And we are, in terms like an intermediary for these institutions, where their donors can donate directly to their endowments that we manage. And we're decently represented across the country in different pockets and different communities, but we definitely want to be doing more. Our fee structure is very simple. It is 0.75% for the first $500,000. If you have more than $500,000 in your endowment, then the scale slides down the more funding that you put in. So, roughly speaking, if your endowment is $20,000 or less, it will be $175 a year for AMCF to manage. And if it's more than that $20,000, then it becomes 0.75%. So this is simply for AMCF to manage the endowment. Our investment manager, if you put these funds into a mutual fund or something that is like a halal ETF, all of our investments are always Sharia compliant. There will be no additional administrative fee, but we have the option to provide a more moderate or aggressive investment strategy that is still Sharia compliant. And it is a customized portfolio And this option comes at an additional 1% for the management of that investment strategy. So, in terms of being able to have the flexibility to do more, last year, for example, our investment strategy provided a 17% return on the stock market. Those of you that are familiar or have been following the S&P 500 last year was around 17% as well. So our Sharia compliant investment portfolios match the industry standard as well. So for an example, and this may be an outdated slide, but I wanted to show you, had you started an endowment in the year 2000 and invested $10,000 a year over the course of 18 years, instead of it being $180,000 if you just set aside 10K for 18 years, through the power of investing, and in this example, using Amana mutual funds as a investment option, that $10,000 in the first year would have had a roughly 4% return. But in the year 2000, the overall market return was negative 10%. So a lot of times, even in the down years, these Sharia compliant options are doing a little bit better than the market as well. And in some years, say 2008, obviously that was a recession and there were auto bailouts happening. It was a really tough year. Yes, there was a negative return on the portfolio. But on different years, say in 2013, there was a full swing and almost 30% yield in return on the ROI, on the principal. So again, just by simply putting in $10,000 a year and by investing that 10,000 annually, by doing that year over year again and again, you're able to, in this real life example, yield $537,000 over the course of 18 years, as opposed to just letting cash stay as cash over time. So this protects you against inflation. This protects you against so many other things as well. And of course, you can't predict the future returns, but over the course of 18 years in this example, you see a few down years, but majority up years, and having a positive impact on that investment. So something to remember, and I'm going to allow a lot of time for question and answer. But as you think about the impact that you want your school to have, that you want your parents of the students and grandparents of the students and donors and alumni of your school, is the hadith that deeds most loved by Allah are those that are done regularly, even if they are small. So even as an institution, if you're able to put this to practice, even if it's small comparatively to your budget, comparatively to what you're able to do, by setting aside something annually into an endowment, you can follow this model of this hadith as well. So I know that was a very brief overview of the history and the mechanics of an endowment, but I think most people learn best when they ask questions and can hear from others. And feel free, if you know an answer or have an experience with an endowment, to share your experience as well. But I'll put this up here for now to let you learn more about American Muslim Community Foundation. You can find us on social media at a Muslim CF, or you can scan the QR code to join our email list. But I'll turn it back to Sister Quran to open it up to questions from the audience, and happy to answer more specifics about American Muslim Community Foundation and how an endowment can benefit your institution. And I'll also put in a few links into the chat that you can find out more about AMCF's endowments that we manage.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so very much. Does anyone have any questions for Brother Muhi? That was really wonderful. Any questions? You can drop it in the chat, or if you raise your hand, we will acknowledge you. All right, Cameron, go right ahead. Cameron.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Muhi. Quick two
Awesome.
questions. The first one is, so I think the Amana Growth Fund is being obviously offered by multiple institutes, whether you look at, I think Saturna also has that, and you guys have it, and I'm sure some other organizations have it. So what I would like to understand is, let's say, um, what is the difference and differentiation of your institute? Why somebody would, let's say, invest that through you rather than some other institute? Because if underneath both of you are offering the similar Amana Growth Fund.
Yeah.
So to be very specific, like, is there a difference in terms of the fee and the cost structure which differentiates you or something else? That's the first question that I have.
Yeah, great question. And you can definitely work directly with Saturna Capital or Amana Mutual Funds. You would just simply need to fill out their paperwork and open up a brokerage account with them to be able to invest on their platform, right? The benefit of working with AMCF is we simply have a MOU contract, and that's the only document that needs to be signed, whereas it may be more cumbersome paperwork to do with other institutions. So by simply signing the one MOU agreement that we have, we're able to open up the investment account for you, and then you can simply transfer funds, or your donors can directly transfer funds to AMCF to put into your endowment. And as far as the fee structure goes, Saturna Capital has an expense ratio. They're always going to take that regardless of whatever platform you're on. The benefit of going through AMCF is their institutional shares are when you put in more than $100,000 at once. So because AMCF is pooling resources from multiple areas, we already have access to the ratio of their institutional shares. So if you were to open an account directly with Amana, but you don't have $100,000 with them, you will be charged at a higher level than you would, say, with AMCF directly, even at 15,000 or 20,000, without having the need to put in $100,000 to get the lower expense ratio for their institutional shares.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. I'll come back for another, but I would obviously allow others to ask the questions first.
Sure.
Thank you, Brother Cameron. And now, Sister Nafisa Salam.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is that in your experience has it been pretty positive with getting donors to donate to the endowment fund, like as opposed to just, some people they donate to a school, but then it's like they're just donating to your normal budget. So I know some people like to see growth in the community. They like to see growth long term. And so has that been like really positive, a selling point to get people to donate to the endowment fund?
Yeah, definitely. And I can speak to AMCF's endowment, and maybe the 25 or so that we manage. We are seeing many of these institutions year after year putting in more and more funds, right? So it's about the conversations that you have with your donors, explaining the benefits of an endowment, that it's here for the future sustainability of the institution, that it can act as a sadaqah jariyah, as we mentioned. So by explaining these things, some donors may be willing to give more and putting it into an endowment, and opening up those conversations is a good starting point to talk to them about setting up an endowment and showcasing your interest in an endowment and seeing who would be willing to support an endowment before you carry out doing so to make sure that there is an interest from your donors. But in our case, we have seen many donors giving to not only the operations but also additionally to the endowment as well.
And do you have a website or some literature that
Yep, we've
okay.
placed it into the chat. It's a few messages up.
Okay. Jazakallah khair.
Oh yeah.
You have the floor, Brother Cameron.
Okay, well, if nobody else is asking, so I get Brother Muhi. I mean, in general, I've heard a lot positive things about, let's say, the what is the Yaqeen Institute having a very Alhamdulillah, a big, probably above of 80 plus million in endowments. So I'm just curious why, like, have they like interacted with you or somebody like that, which is like kind of serves as a role, kind of a model institute with such a high worth. Do you have any insights? Do you have any interaction with them? And have they, did you guys have any like conversations with them about it?
Yeah, I know that they manage their own endowment independently. So they
Okay.
have enough staff, enough structure, but we actually use the same investment manager. So our investment manager is Undulus Capital based out of New York.
Mm-hmm.
And Sister Fadia, the money is invested with Undulus Capital, all in
Mm-hmm.
the stock market through public securities that are screened for Sharia compliance through Zoya Finance. And
Okay.
Undulus Capital is AOFI certified as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we do our due diligence for Sharia compliance. And we make sure that they calculate for anything else that needs to be done to purify those investments.
Okay. Should I continue asking? I hope if.
No, you can, but we have Sister Halima, and then
Okay,
we can
please go
come
ahead.
back to you, Brother Cameron.
Mhm.
Sure.
I was just going to ask about government regulations. So let's say a school were to go through the endowment. Can you get into like what we have to, we obviously have to tell our accountants, I mean, the regulations, and does it differ by state? Are there different rules?
Yeah, that's a great question around compliance. I know as far as reporting to the IRS in your 990s, you will be able to put it on your balance sheet, and AMCF lists it as a liability because it can be returned back to your institution. So we will put it on our balance sheet, but it's listed as a liability for AMCF. And then you should definitely be reporting it on your own 990s. And we regularly share what that report is on a quarterly basis and annual basis so that when you're filing your taxes, you have that information.
So our number one thing is to report that we have an endowment, and then we have to report that we put 50,000 in there yearly, right? Like we have to report that.
Yeah, as a you'll report it as an asset or investment on your taxes.
Taxes.
Yeah.
And there's no other regulations that we need to be concerned about, or people worry about what the paperwork trail becomes.
Yeah, because you're trusting AMCF as your investment manager for this, legal purposes, it's like I said, best practice is establishing a separate 501c3, maintaining that organization. That would be considered your endowment. Through the MOU that AMCF has, you're entrusting AMCF as an investment manager for the purposes of this long-term sustainability.
Okay.
So it acts almost like a quasi endowment in a sense.
Okay, but so you're saying that an Islamic school should probably have those two donors or whatever create the endowment. Like
If
it
you
should
have the
not necessarily.
capacity, if you have the capacity to, sure. But if you simply want an investment vehicle that will act like an endowment for you, partnering with AMCF is a very great, easy solution to have the same level of investment and care without the additional framework and headache of establishing a separate 501c3 and doing all of that. Essentially, you're entrusting AMCF as your investment manager for the funds that you set aside in a
Okay. And then
quasi endowment.
do you meet with the people investing monthly, yearly, or do you go like and
We
have a
have
virtual
meetings
meeting with them?
weekly with our investment strategist, Undulus Capital. So we meet with them weekly.
No. But like, let's say we were to entrust a certain amount with you, then do we have a yearly financial recap of how we're doing? Or is it just something you
Yes,
send us in the mail?
quarterly reports
Okay.
are sent to you in full detail of what it's invested in and how it's performing. So and additional meetings can be set up outside of that quarterly report.
Okay. Okay. And can you tell us of any Islamic schools you're working with currently?
Averroes High School is the one that comes off the top of my
Can you
head.
put it in the chat because it'll be hard to remember?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Halima. And just for verification, Brother Muhi, you set a 501c3, you set up a separate 501c3. If a school is set up as a 501c3, does that count or do they need to have a separate one just for the endowment?
So this is high level best practice is to establish a separate charity and entity. Many don't do that, and that's okay. But if you're talking about best practice, it would be to have a separate board, a separate nonprofit, and doing all those things. But since that's very cumbersome, AMCF comes in as a good partner institution to say, hey, let's make this easier in this process. Let's sign this MOU contract agreement where you entrust AMCF to be your investment manager, and we'll do this in a much easier fashion.
Thank you. Next, Tawfiq. I think I said that right. I hope I said that right. Tawfiq
Yes, you
Kalimullah.
did. Yes, you did. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks so much for taking the time. Very informative. So I had a very fundamental question. So you touched upon this at the start of your presentation. So what's the difference between an investment account and an endowment account?
Yeah, so investment account is simply just like having a brokerage account at any financial institution and being able to purchase stocks or public securities there. And that's essentially how we will manage the account for you. An endowment account would, again, be having a separate entity that is officially named your endowment, and then that entity has the brokerage account there, if that is helpful.
It is, but what does an endowment give me that an investment account does not?
Longer term sustainability, separate assets. If anything were to happen to one of the entities, the other one is still there. So from like a legality standpoint, but essentially you can do all of the same things with just a brokerage account. It's just the management and oversight of that. And who on your team is an expert to do that and make the trades and know what investments to make. That's why the partnership with AMCF is valued, because we have this chief investment officer who's managing a portfolio of several millions of dollars for all of our partners.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I see some in the chat, which I'll
Yes, I see
go
that,
to.
but Khadija was first,
Okay, sure.
and then we'll go to Mahmoudou.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for this informative presentation. I do have one question. In terms of the endowments, is there a time fixed? Is it more like a fixed time frame where you have it has to be 10 years or it has to be 20 years, and in order to access the I guess the money that it was made, how does it come back to and benefit the school?
Yeah. We elect to provide an annual distribution. Many of the charities put the funds back into the investment vehicle. So, although they're eligible to receive an annual distribution, many will just put it back in to continue to be invested.
Okay,
So, you don't
yeah.
need to wait a certain period of time. You're eligible for a distribution that year that you open up the endowment with us.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Shukran.
I'll pull up the slide with our fees again to answer Nada's question. But there are no minimum investment required. We have a suggested minimum of $10,000, but there is no required minimum. And then I'll put the fees back up on the screen as well so that you can see it. Again, it's 0.75% on the first 500,000. And it's an additional 1% for a customized investment portfolio. For Mahmoudul, donor advised funds are the other service that AMCF provides, but donor advised funds are for corporations or families and individuals. So those are essentially almost like sadaqah savings accounts or zakat saving accounts that families can put all of their giving into and then give to a nonprofit organization from. So that's the other service that AMCF provides.
And do you see the question about working with Canadian Muslim schools?
Yeah. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to, but I don't know the tax laws and implications from a Canadian standpoint. So, Amira, I would just look into that before you look into working with AMCF. I don't think we work with any schools in Virginia, but I think we definitely have organizations that are headquartered in Virginia, Amatullah. So again, the schools off the top of my head, I can only think of Averroes High School in the San Francisco Bay Area. Jamilat?
Assalamu alaikum. I was wondering, what's the difference between your custom I guess funds versus what you have as the default for the 0.75%?
Yeah, so our default will be the halal ETFs and mutual funds that are on the market, whether that's the halal stock, the SPUS stock, the Amana mutual funds that you're familiar with. Those are essentially going to be our default. But if you want a customized portfolio, then they're selecting from, one portfolio could have a distribution of like 300 different stocks, and it's actively managed, meaning that trades could be made on a weekly basis. Whereas in a mutual fund, you kind of just set it and forget it, and it just sits there. But the actively managed portfolios have a more moderate to aggressive methodology, so it can potentially yield more reward in that process as well.
And I also imagine you have more choice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Jazakumullah khairan.
Sabriya?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this great informational session. I wanted to ask one question. You mentioned something in regards to an institution or a school may having a lot of times might be best practice or suggested for an institution to have a separate, say, nonprofit organization, but most don't. And that's where you're speaking about the endowment fund. So can you just speak a little bit more about, I guess, an endowment fund versus an institution having a separate nonprofit organization for them?
Yeah, so many times organizations will create a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization that is known as like a supporting organization or supporting institution, and its sole primary focus is to be the endowment for that other organization. So an example of this would be like Islamic Relief USA and Islamic Relief Waqf, right? Or like Yaqeen Institute and then Yaqeen's endowment, right? They're separate entities, but they're directly related to support one another because these are large teams, large organizations. They have the capacity to be managing two nonprofit organizations. And more importantly, they have excess of millions of dollars to be running the operations of both institutions, right? For other organizations that aren't in that, multi-million dollar phase or institutional growth, a good option is to simply partner with AMCF because we have the expertise in our chief investment officer. We have the trusted vehicle of these endowment services. You don't need to worry about opening up a brokerage account, having board members fill out paperwork, do additional things to get things operating and running. It's as simple as talking to your board, getting their approval, signing the MOU, working with AMCF to do the investment. So we try to streamline that process as much as we can to make it easy for smaller to mid-size organizations to still have an endowment per se, but do it in a much more effective manner.
Okay. All right, Jazakallah.
Yeah.
Said.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,
I'm an Islamic school teacher in Madison, Wisconsin. We're actually looking for a principal. I'm not here to plug that, but I figured I'd say it anyways. So, yeah, we're a relatively small school, but we're growing, very diverse. And I think that, I like this idea of partnering with AMCF, in order to get the ball rolling. Recently in Dallas, I believe, or yeah, oh no, it was at Renaissance Academy actually. So I believe that's in Austin. There has been like attacks against the establishment of the Waqf and the endowment fund, even through the 501c3 or through the foundation. So I guess in terms of like a legal way, does AMCF, like, is there a way to protect the school or the institution? Because if we're just one institution, I like the idea of having multiple institutions in order, everything doesn't fall onto one institution if they're being attacked by certain groups. I guess what I'm asking is, what does the legal protection look like? What are steps that we can take? Because I feel like there might be a fear there, especially if I'm trying to bring this to my board. They do a bit of research and say, oh, well, we want to be careful of this.
Yeah, I think you bring up some great points, and I'm not too familiar with that state law or how that's being enacted. I haven't seen too much on taxes or anything additional to other assets that organizations may have. The only thing I've seen is more so unrelated business income tax that can be if your organization has a business associated with it. But as far as endowments go, I haven't seen an additional tax or penalty on separate assets. Alhamdulillah, to date, AMCF hasn't been on any watch lists or, selected in that case in terms of fear mongering from other institutions. So we haven't had that come up yet. So maybe not the answer that you were looking for, but just I don't have enough myself around those scenarios.
No, I mean, that's good. I guess, yeah, I think it's just worth looking into,
Absolutely.
who's partnering with who, because they'll immediately try to go for this organization or this organization. So no, I appreciate that. Jazakallahu khair.
Welcome.
Okay, and Tawfiq?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Another follow-up question. So, you'd mentioned about through an endowment, you leave your principal untouched and then just, when you get the returns, are those returns tax deductible because you're a 501(c)(3)? I mean, tax exempt?
Yes. So any growth as a nonprofit organization will be tax-free for gains on those investments.
Okay, even if you cash out, right? Not just let it grow.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no capital gains tax as a nonprofit.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't see any more questions. Are there any? There are none in the chat, and I don't see any more hands up. So if you want to give us a wrap up, Brother Muhi, feel free.
Yeah, bismillah. So, just thank you so much I see one more in the chat. Is there restrictions on the amounts of endowments? For example, if a nonprofit filed the short form, which has something like a 50K limit, how is the endowment affected at all? So my understanding, the short form or the 990 easy for tax purposes is for any organization who has revenue under $50,000. I would imagine if your school is operating under $50,000, maybe it's in its very first year, or maybe it's just under 50K. But once your income exceeds 50K, that's when you do the regular 990 tax form. So that would be the only difference, is if the amount in your endowment pushes you over that 50K annual revenue, then you would just simply have to submit the regular 990 form instead of the easy form. I hope that answers your question. I'm not the law. But yeah, I think, if it, okay, great. If you're thinking about your institution's future sustainability, if you want to try over the next 5 to 10 years to get to a place where you don't have to always be worried about your month-to-month operating budget, or annually worry about your institution making, the tough choices that it often has to make in terms of budget cuts and things like that. Hopefully, an endowment can be the answer to those the solution to those questions. And by setting a little bit this year, next year, and setting a goal, and even having a separate committee to fundraise for the endowment, all of these things can bring in new, fresh air and perspective to your institution. So again, you don't have to have hundreds of thousands right off the bat. You can start off with whatever amount is good for your organization. Some do a percentage of what they bring in. Others start off with, what's reasonable for them. Again, we don't have any minimums, but we suggest anywhere around $10,000 so that you can see the effects of the return on investment. AMCF would be happy and honored to steward your investment strategy to set up your endowment. And if you have any questions, I will put up the last slide again that has the email list that you can join. And also, you can find more information in the chat that we have put in our, I can drop in our email address and also our website as well. So you can reach out to us at any time. We have an endowment inquiry form on our website, which I'll also drop in as well. And then we just have our general endowments page that has more information on the services that we provide to our nonprofit organizations. So hopefully you found value and benefit in what we shared today. And inshallah, again, we look forward to hearing from you on our end. And hopefully you learned a little bit about endowments. The fees go back into the community as support fees. So whether it's from our endowments or from our donor advised funds, the services that we provide, AMCF does professional development for nonprofit organizations through monthly webinars, and we also do grant making. So in those scenarios, we put our administrative fees back into the community, and they're called our support fees.
And we'll let this one last question from Brother Said be our last question.
Sorry about that. It was just more so about this webinar. Will this be recorded, or is there a way for me to get the transcript just so I can go back over it when presenting the case?
Absolutely. Good question and a great way for us to end. So thank you so very much, Brother Muhi. Thank you to all of you who have participated in today's webinar. And just a reminder to you that ISLA, Islamic Schools League of America, we specialize in these kinds of things, looking at the sustainability of our schools. That is the history of how we began and how we continue the work that we do. So all of those who registered for today's webinar will receive the recording, inshallah. And just a reminder to all of you, and again, we thank you for joining us, but also we want to say to you that if you're not already liking us, befriending us, and following us on social media, please do. These are our different social media platforms. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp. We have an email list, our group IECN, that you can join. We have YouTube, so we invite you to join with us in the work that we are doing. And we also thank you again for being here today. And we close, inshallah, with our dua. And our dua is Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We pray that our entry into this meeting was by the gate of truth and honor, and now our exit by the gate of truth and honor. We ask Allah to empower us with His Spirit and make it easy for us to extract the excellence that He has put in us. We ask you, O Allah, to guide us and bless us and protect us and the future of our institutions and our children that you have entrusted to us. Ameen, ameen, ameen.
Ameen. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you again.
Thank you.
جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.